Most people fear old age not because the physical body eventually weakens, but because they believe something essential disappears along with it. They fear losing their purpose. They fear losing their meaning. They fear losing their core identity. The true terror isn't about getting wrinkles, gray hair, or slowing down physically. It is the terrifying, suffocating thought of becoming completely invisible, irrelevant, and unfinished to the world around you. From the very moment we are young, modern culture trains us to constantly chase youth, high productivity, and external validation. We are taught exactly how to perform, how to succeed, and how to remain useful to society. We are given a script for how to build a life, but we are almost never taught how to actually grow old. Instead, aging is constantly framed as a sad, inevitable decline. Slowness is treated as a personal failure. Moments of absolute stillness are viewed as something to be avoided at all costs. We treat the end of life like a broken machine that is slowly running out of fuel. Carl Jung believed this was a tragic, profound misunderstanding of human existence. According to Jung, the second half of your life is not just a weaker, slower, sadder continuation of the first half. It is a completely different psychological journey altogether. Jung used a beautiful analogy to explain this. He said that in the morning, the sun rises and expands its light across the earth. It climbs higher and higher into the sky, conquering the darkness, building momentum, and exerting its power over the world. This is the first half of human life. It is aggressive, outward, and full of ambition. But then, the sun hits the noon meridian. It reaches the absolute peak of its climb, and at that exact moment, a complete reversal happens. The sun must begin its descent. It must start to pull its light back inward. If the sun tried to stay at high noon forever, it would burn the entire world to a crisp. Its descent is not a failure. It is a necessary part of the cycle. The first half of life is entirely about building your place in the world, securing your career, making money, and establishing your reputation. The second half of life is about finally discovering who you actually are without the world's constant applause. One phase moves aggressively outward, the other phase moves deeply inward. Jung did not see aging as a tragic loss of capability. He saw it as a massive transformation, a necessary turning inward, and a final movement toward what he called psychological wholeness. Within his lifetime of work lie 4 essential psychological pillars that determine whether old age becomes a time of bitter resentment and fear, or the most profoundly meaningful phase of your entire existence. These pillars are not comforting illusions, cheap self-help tricks, or toxic positivity. They are demanding, heavy, and sometimes deeply unsettling truths about the human psyche. The 4th pillar in particular is almost never discussed openly in our culture, yet Jung considered it absolutely essential for peace. Without it, the other 3 pillars remain completely unfinished. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because without that final insight, peace in your later years will always remain completely out of reach. The first major pillar is individuation, which is the ultimate shift from outer authority to your own inner truth. To understand this, we have to look at how we build our identities in the first half of our lives. When you are young, your identity is built almost entirely through social adaptation. You learn exactly how to belong to a group. You learn how to meet your parents' expectations. You learn how to follow the rules of your school, your culture, and your workplace. You learn what behaviors get you rewards and what behaviors get you punished. To survive, you have to build a specific front. Jung called this adaptive identity the persona. Think of the persona as a psychological mask or a specialized uniform that allows you to function smoothly in society. It is the version of you that goes to work, the version that smiles at social gatherings, and the version that tries desperately to be liked and respected. The persona isn't fake, and it isn't dishonest. It is highly necessary. You need a persona to get a job, maintain relationships, and navigate the chaos of everyday life. But major psychological problems begin when that mask permanently hardens into concrete. When a person becomes completely identical with the professional or social role they once needed to survive, they get trapped. They mistake the mask for their actual face. Many people reach midlife or old age still living inside rigid identities they formed decades earlier. They remain stuck being the responsible provider, the obedient child, the hyperachiever, or the respectable community figure. Suddenly, roles that once brought immense stability and pride start to feel completely empty. You look in the mirror and realize you've spent 40 years fulfilling everyone else's dreams while your own soul sat in the dark. This deep internal discomfort isn't a sign of mental failure or a midlife crisis to be ashamed of. It is a crucial, life-saving signal from your subconscious. Your psyche is begging for a brand new orientation. It is saying that the morning rules no longer work for the afternoon. This is where individuation comes in. It is the gradual, steady shift of authority from the loud outer world to your quiet inner world. It is the moment you realize that true meaning can never be permanently borrowed from job titles, bank accounts, institutions, or the approval of other people. This transition is rarely comfortable. Old certainties begin to weaken. Former goals completely lose their emotional charge. Money, status, and material things that used to excite you suddenly feel like hollow toys. You might feel disoriented, restless, or quietly depressed. Jung did not see this as a medical illness. He saw it as true psychological maturation. Something essential inside you is finally trying to break free from the prison of external expectations. Individuation doesn't mean withdrawing from society, abandoning your family, or isolating yourself from the people you love. It means alignment. It means you stop letting the outside world dictate your worth. In old age, this inner authority becomes absolutely crucial. Without it, aging feels like a non-stop, agonizing process of subtraction. You lose your job, you lose your youth, you lose your social status. But with individuation, aging becomes a beautiful process of refinement. You realize that what is being stripped away was just the scaffolding. What remains at the end is not less. It is simply truer. If individuation is your final destination, then the shadow is the dark, uncharted terrain that you must have the courage to cross to get there. The shadow contains absolutely everything we rejected about ourselves in order to be accepted by others when we were young. Think of it like a psychological basement where you throw all the parts of your personality that didn't fit into your clean, polite persona. It holds the traits your parents judged as unacceptable, the intense emotions you suppressed out of shame, the hidden desires you feared, and the massive creative potentials you never dared to live out because you were afraid of being laughed at. These hidden aspects of your personality do not simply disappear just because you ignore them or pretend they aren't there. They accumulate in the dark, gathering pressure over decades. In your younger years, the raw pressures of survival, building a career and raising a family, keep the shadow at bay. You are too busy running around to notice the noise coming from the basement. But as those external demands naturally begin to fade, your life slows down and the shadow finally begins to speak up. It refuses to be silenced anymore. In later life, an unintegrated shadow often shows up as intense, heavy regret. It shows up as deep bitterness toward the younger generation, sharp cynicism, or a quiet, heavy sadness with no obvious external cause. Many people mistake this emotional wave for standard aging or a bad mood. Jung understood it as a profound, urgent invitation. He believed that true moral development does not mean trying to become a perfectly pure, flawless human being. It means learning how to become whole. And to become whole, you have to meet your shadow. Shadow integration requires absolute, brutal honesty without an ounce of self-deception. It means looking into your own history and recognizing your capacity for anger and aggression without acting it out. It means acknowledging your secret envy of others without carrying crushing shame. It means accepting your deepest, softest vulnerabilities without completely collapsing. This process is highly uncomfortable because it completely dismantles the pristine, perfect image you have carefully constructed of yourself over a lifetime. It forces you to admit that you are not just the hero of your story, but sometimes the villain too. But this confrontation is also incredibly liberating. The moment the shadow is acknowledged, brought into the light, and integrated, it instantly loses its destructive unconscious power over your life. What once erupted out of you completely sideways as sudden outbursts of rage, passive-aggressive remarks, or self-sabotaging behavior can now be held consciously and calmly. In later life, this integration produces a beautiful, rare psychological softening. Harsh judgment of others naturally gives way to deep understanding. Rigidity gives way to flexibility. Frantic reactivity gives way to a calm, unshakable presence. This doesn't happen because life suddenly became easy, but because the person finally stopped lying to themselves in the mirror. They have integrated their dark side, and in doing so, they have finally found peace. The third major pillar is finding meaning after achievement, which requires moving completely from the anxiety of doing to the absolute peace of being. One of the deepest, most painful crises of aging in our modern era comes directly from a cultural misunderstanding of what human meaning actually is. Modern society foolishly equates human value with economic productivity. We are told that you are only worth what you produce, what you earn, and how fast you can run. You are validated based on your output. Because of this toxic conditioning, when your productivity naturally slows down due to age or retirement, your entire identity can suffer a catastrophic collapse. You look at your empty calendar and ask, if I am not working, if I am not building, if I am not providing, then who am I? Do I even matter anymore? Jung considered this a profound, dangerous psychological error. The second half of life demands a completely different kind of meaning, one that is based entirely on being rather than doing. As your remaining time on Earth naturally shortens, your attention instinctively turns away from the horizontal line of accumulation and toward the vertical line of depth. This isn't a form of regression, laziness, or giving up on life. It is a necessary, organic transformation. When you are 70, the future no longer stretches out endlessly ahead of you, like it did when you were 20. And because that future shrinks, the present moment becomes incredibly deep. Suddenly, your daily experiences are no longer judged by how useful they are to a career or a bank account. They are judged by how deeply they resonate with your soul. A walk through the park, a conversation with an old friend, or a quiet cup of coffee in the morning is no longer a distraction from your goals. It becomes the goal itself. Your memories, your imagination, and your personal reflections gain massive importance. Life finally begins to feel completely coherent rather than fragmented into a million frantic pieces. Past events that you once experienced as painful failures, broken relationships, or massive career mistakes reveal themselves as highly necessary movements within a much larger, beautiful story. You start to see that the dark chapters were just as important as the bright ones. Meaning in later life arises from seeing your entire existence as a whole tapestry, not as a checklist of trophies and achievements, but as a fully lived psychological journey. This perspective brings a quiet, unshakable fulfillment that does not depend on anyone else's recognition, applause, or validation. You become self-contained. You are no longer chasing the next big thing because you realize that the big thing is already happening inside you. Yet, even this beautiful state of being remains completely incomplete without facing the final, most difficult psychological task of all. The fourth pillar is reconciling with death, which Jung viewed as the final act of true psychological maturity. Modern culture treats death like a horrific medical failure, a taboo topic to be postponed, avoided, and completely ignored until the last possible second. We hide our elderly in institutions, we dye our hair, we freeze our wrinkles, and we pretend that mortality is an optional glitch in the system. Jung treated death with a completely different level of respect. He viewed it as an absolute psychological reality to be deeply understood and integrated into daily life. Jung believed that the human psyche prepares for death just as naturally and organically as it prepares for life. If you pay close attention to the dreams, powerful symbols, and deep shifts in awareness that occur in older adults, you will see that the subconscious mind is not panicking. It is naturally getting ready for a transition. When this natural process is resisted out of fear and ego, absolute anxiety dominates your remaining years. You spend your energy gripping onto a youthful existence that is already slipping through your fingers. But when death is consciously accepted, an incredible, radiant calm emerges. Jung never claimed to know exactly what happens to human consciousness after the physical body dies. He was a scientist, not a prophet. But to him, what mattered most was your current attitude toward mortality while you are still alive. A life lived in complete frantic denial of death becomes incredibly shallow. It forces you to live a life driven entirely by cheap distraction, superficial entertainment, and constant avoidance. You have to keep the music loud so you don't hear the clock ticking. But a life lived in full, calm awareness of mortality becomes deeply sincere, highly focused, and profoundly meaningful. To make peace with death is not to desire it, nor is it about giving up on the beauty of living. It is simply about giving mortality its rightful, respected place within your understanding of existence. When death is openly acknowledged as the boundary of life, your daily priorities instantly clarify. Petty concerns, old grudges, social anxieties, and minor daily stresses completely fall away. You realize you don't have time to waste on bitterness or fake relationships. What remains after that clearing is what truly matters: deep connection, absolute truth, integrity, and pure, raw presence. In this sense, death is not the cruel enemy of life. It is its silent, wisest partner. It gives immense depth to our daily choices and massive gravity to our personal values. Beauty exists because it is fleeting. This final pillar cannot be taught to you as a quick mental technique or a set of instructions. It emerges very slowly through reflection, through navigating the painful loss of loved ones, and through finding internal courage. But when it finally clicks, old age completely ceases to feel like a sad, dark decline. It becomes a beautiful, triumphant completion. For Jung, a fulfilled old age is never achieved by desperately clinging to your youth or trying to run backward on the timeline. It is achieved by completing the inward journey. It requires individuation, shadow integration, finding meaning way beyond achievement, and an ultimate peaceful reconciliation with your own mortality. In this sense, aging is not the tragic end of life. It is the final, most important act of becoming completely whole. If this reflection spoke to your soul today, make sure to subscribe for more videos that go way beneath surface motivation and deep into the actual architecture of the human soul. And if this video helped you see aging, meaning, or your own life journey a little bit differently, hit that like button and share it with someone who might be quietly searching for the exact same understanding right now. Because the second half of your life was never meant to be empty. It was meant to be completely conscious. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.